Welcome to F&I Today with Becky Chernick. Brought to you by eLend Solutions.
Welcome to F&I Today. I'm your host, Becky Chernick. Today we welcome Lisa Bundy, also known as Car Girl. Recently, Lisa posted an article on LinkedIn titled Record Number of Car Buyers Upside Down. Blame it on easy credit and extended terms. Now, more customers than ever before are upside down, buried in negative equity with no end in sight. Who's to blame? How will this affect car sales in 2017? Some blame it on the consumers shopping for cars they simply can't afford, but is that really the case? Or are auto dealers taking the path of least resistance by selling extended terms rather than shorter term financing? Lisa Bundy, welcome to F&I Today show. It's certainly a pleasure to have you here and in studio. And you are also known as Car Girl. You know, recently I saw a post on LinkedIn, and actually it was an article that you were referencing called Record Number of Car Buyers Upside Down, Blame It on This Easy Credit and Extended Terms. And what I found interesting is that you had several industry veterans who actually responded and said, you know whose fault it is? It's the customer's fault. And that they want this high dollar vehicle, but yet they want the lower payment. That's pretty much how they see it. How do you see it? Who's to blame here?
Well, I agree. Every customer wants the Cadillac for the cruise payment, but I think there's plenty of blame to go around here altogether. I think you've got the banks, you've got the manufacturers, you've got the dealers, and you've also got the consumers. They've all kind of played a part in this.
Okay, so also I would imagine in your travels as much as in my travels, when I get into these dealerships, some of the sales training that I see is quite sometimes limited, as well as some sales management training. In fact, I just recently published an article on CBT Automotive News about keeping them in the dark. And less is more, so they say, because the more we train them, and some of these guys think some of these salespeople, you can't train them anyway, but by keeping them in the dark, they'll actually make more profit. So some of these guys, would you say, are going to the path of least resistance, and maybe that first pencil that goes out to the customer is at extended terms, 72 months, no money down? What's going on there?
Absolutely, and then you're setting the customer up not just for failure, but keep in mind, you're taking the customer out of the trade cycle that much longer. So now, as far as getting them back into the dealership 2-3 years down the road, it's going to be 4 and 5 years down the road. So it's going to take training. We see a lot of salespeople that are unfortunately order takers. Instead of educating the customer and giving them the options, if they understood where they were going to be positioned in the car, if that's the car in fact that they want, that this is what it's going to cost, and it's their choice. I think the consumers are smart enough to be able to make a wise choice if given those choices, but we don't give them the choices, we just automatically make that choice for them.
I think you couldn't said it better, because I think that there should be training as far as benefit. What it benefits the customer by taking advantage of a shorter term financing as opposed to the extended term financing. That if they would bite the bullet, it would be better all the way around. But again, I think a lot of that training isn't taking place. And I can tell you how many times I'm in a store, I ask the sales associate to go ahead and present a worksheet, and very seldom are they comfortable in doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And unfortunately, the sales, it doesn't just happen on the sales floor, but it has to be a concerted effort from the salesman to the sales manager to F&I. It should be one flow. They should all be on the same page, but the customer does play into that. Now, unfortunately, what I see now is you're going to start to have some pushback from the banks. And the banks are going to stop doing those high LTVs. They'll still do the term, but again, those high LTVs, you can't keep rolling negative equity into the next payment, into the next payment, into the next payment. At some point in time, somebody has to say, okay, how do we get out of this?
What right now is the average term on a new car going for right now?
Average loan term on a new car is around 68 months.
Wow. That really is getting up there. So the question I have is, many times, of course, this is the F&I Today show, so I think that F&I people can be at fault as well. And what I mean by that is we have sales managers that will close the sale at 60, 66 months, that sort of thing. But once it gets into that F&I office to sell the additional products, rather than maybe sell the value of the product so much, sometimes they lean more towards the term.
Well, you mentioned it, path of least resistance. It's much easier to extend 6 months and keep the payment the same than it is to try to show them the value of it, because who knows, they might say no. But if you do a good job of showing the value, most customers, most consumers will say, absolutely, that's what I need. How many times have you upgraded yourself? I know I have all the time.
Well, when we talk about upgrading, meaning first class flights, many times I take coach. But now and again, I feel like, you know what? I deserve to be upgraded to first class, and I see the value in it, especially if you're going 3 hours or more in flight. So yeah, I quite get that. So that's kind of like how the customer might perceive taking advantage of any of these products as a value, as opposed to, extending that term out and taking that path of least resistance. I think that's what you're saying.
Absolutely, the peace of mind. I mean, that's what you're selling in a lot of these products is peace of mind.
And it's so important to the business, because how are we going to handle that? I mean, rates are going up.
Yes.
They're not going down.
No.
And so if customers are coming out of these trades and they're already upside down, how are they affording the payment?
But that's a good question. They're affording the payment right now because we've stretched the term to 72 and 84 months, and in some cases 96. But the question is, how are we going to get out of all this? And how I see it is that the banks and the manufacturers and the dealers and the consumers are all going to have to play a part in trying to help bring us back out of this so that the payments are affordable for the customer and they can still continue to purchase new cars.
How do you see this all working out for 2017?
Well, I've already seen some of the banks start to, as I said, lower their LTVs or not continue to increase them. They've also held term a little bit closer to what they had before. Manufacturers right now, I believe we're at 15% increase on incentives over 2015. So the manufacturers are starting to throw more money into it to keep the customer, to get them out of that negative equity situation. On the dealer side, it's going to have to come down to training for them. They're going to have to know going in what they've got and not expect the banks and everybody else to kind of work their way out of it. They need to take an active role in that. And then lastly is the consumer needs to understand that also.
Well, they've been pretty easy in 2016, 15, right?
Absolutely.
And now we have to
we got to
roll up their sleeves and try to figure this out and make things happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great year, but again, it's going to take a little bit of effort on all of our parts.
Well, good. Well, Lisa Bundy, it is a pleasure to have you on the F&I Today in studio, and I hope we get you back real soon.
Thanks, I appreciate it, Becky.
As Lisa Bundy points out, it will take everyone to turn this ship around. As a dear friend, Alan E. Willie, points out on social media, success is not measured by how well you do in good times, but rather how well you do when times turn nasty. What practices you put in place today will determine the final outcome. Ignoring the inevitable will diminish your success. Well, thank you for joining me on F&I Today. Also, I'll be speaking at CBT Conference and Expo here in Atlanta, March 7th through the 9th. I'd love to see you there, so register today and be sure to come back next week right here on CBT Automotive Network for our next edition of F&I Today. I'm Becky Chernick, and I'll see you next week.
F&I Today, brought to you by eLend Solutions.